When I was young, life was warm, simple, and steady, like an old radio playing familiar tunes in the background. My mother, gentle but fierce in her way, kept the rhythm of our lives humming. Our home, a modest Victorian tucked at the edge of a sleepy town, wasn't just a house. It was the heart of our family. My mother inherited it from her aunt, who raised her after her parents passed. Every creaking floorboard, every hand-painted flower on the front porch railing held a memory. My dad, quiet and dependable, worked long hours at the local hardware shop, while Mom taught art at the elementary school, her passion seeping into every part of our lives. Sunday mornings were sacred. We'd sit around the kitchen table, sipping orange juice and munching on cinnamon rolls while Mom told us stories from her childhood. Always exaggerated, always magical. She made the mundane feel special, wrapping our sandwiches in napkins she doodled on, filling our backyard with fairy lights even when no one else came over, whispering bedtime wishes into our ears when we thought we were already asleep. I never once doubted I was loved. Then came the stillness. I was 14 when she got sick. At first, it was little things, dropping a glass, losing her words mid-sentence, staring too long at the fridge trying to remember why she opened it. Doctors. Tests. More tests. The kind of words that don't belong in the same sentence as mom. Glioblastoma. Terminal. Inoperable. 6 months, maybe a year. I watched her fade like a watercolor left out in the rain. Even as she lost her hair, her strength, her balance, she smiled for me. I hated it. I hated the way she still tried to shield me from the truth I already knew. She died in the winter, just as the snow started to melt, as if even nature couldn't hold its grief too long. Dad unraveled. He tried to hide it, but some cracks screamed even in silence. He stopped playing music in the mornings. The house fell into this heavy, unbearable hush. He started sleeping on the couch, drinking more than I'd ever seen him drink before. I'd come home from school to find him staring at the muted television or standing in front of the fridge as if he didn't remember what food was for. The dishes piled up. The flowers in the front yard turned brittle and gray. I taught myself how to do laundry, cooked ramen every night, and did my best to not add to his grief. I never blamed him, not really. It's just, he wasn't the same. We weren't. Then came Lily. I was 16, trying to stay invisible, get good grades, and hold on to whatever slivers of my mom I could find in the quiet corners of the house. When he told me he met someone, I didn't know what to say. I'd never heard him speak of another woman since Mom. Her name was Lily, a nurse he met at the walk-in clinic when he went in for a sprained wrist. She had a son and daughter from a previous marriage, both older than me. I don't remember much about that first dinner other than the tension in the air and the way she laughed too loudly at his jokes. She brought a pie. Apple. Homemade. She looked around the house with a strange curiosity, like someone inspecting a bed and breakfast before deciding to book it. Dad beamed the entire time. I pretended to care about my mashed potatoes. Weeks turned into months. Suddenly, she was there all the time, making dinner, reorganizing the pantry, replacing the sun-faded curtains my mom picked out. She didn't ask if it was okay. She just did it. Her son moved in first, Grant, 21, working at some tech startup that somehow let him work remotely from our living room couch. Her daughter, Mia, visited often, always leaving her makeup kits and clothes scattered across the bathroom. The house began to feel claustrophobic, foreign, like I was squatting in someone else's home. Dad said we needed to adapt. It's good to have people around again, he told me, as if I hadn't been right there, trying to keep the place together while he disappeared into himself. Then one evening, as we sat in the living room watching reruns of some police procedural, Lily turned to me and said, "You know, I'd be okay if you wanted to call me Mom." Like it was a compliment, like she was offering me some kind of gift. I stared at her, unsure if I'd heard correctly. I muttered, "I'm good," and left the room. That night, I dug out the box from under my bed. Photos, letters, little watercolor doodles my mom used to tape to the fridge. Her handwriting was still soft and neat. I pressed my face against one of her old scarves and tried to remember her smell. Dad married Lily the following spring in our backyard. My mother's hydrangeas were blooming, but she wasn't there to see them. Lily wore white. I wore a stiff suit and a fake smile. My grandparents, my mom's parents, came, but they looked like ghosts. My grandma leaned close to me at one point and whispered, "This house was your mother's heart. Don't forget that." I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. But I would. Very soon. The changes started subtly, like dust collecting in the corners until you wake up one day and realize you're choking on it. First, it was the furniture. Mom's favorite rocking chair vanished, replaced by a sleek white armchair that looked like it belonged in a furniture showroom, not a lived-in home. Lily called it modernizing. Then came the artwork. My mom's framed paintings, little watercolors of birds and flowers, were taken down and replaced with motivational quotes printed in gold foil. "This house needs light," Lily said once, gesturing around like she was rescuing us from a storm we hadn't realized we were living in. I noticed her kids weren't just visitors anymore. Grant moved into my old room, claiming the better lighting helped with his remote work setup. He had a full gaming rig, a refrigerator full of energy drinks, and noise-canceling headphones he never used when blasting music. I was moved into the smaller spare room, the one we used to call the craft room, where my mom kept all her art supplies. They were gone now. The shelves where her paintbrushes once stood held Grant's collection of Funko Pops and unopened packages. Mia came and went like she was auditioning for a reality show, tan, loud, always on the phone with someone more important than whoever was in the room. She commandeered the bathroom without shame, leaving curling irons plugged in and hair extensions on the counter. Lily said nothing. When I asked her once to maybe talk to Mia about leaving the bathroom cleaner, she laughed like I'd said something adorable and replied, "That's just how girls are, sweetie." Sweetie. She called me that constantly, and every time it felt like a blade wrapped in cotton. She'd use that voice, syrupy and fake, then criticize my grades, my clothes, my silence. "You used to be so sweet," she once said, as if the boy who lost his mother and watched his father build a new family in her absence should have been more cheerful about it. Dad didn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to. He kept praising how great it was that the house felt lively again. "Feels like a family," he said. Just like before. It didn't. Then one night, a week before my high school graduation, I came home from my shift at the bookstore to find Lily standing in the hallway with a paint roller in her hand. My old bedroom door was open. Inside, the walls were being repainted. Gone was the mural my mom had painted for me when I was 7, a sky-blue forest with tiny foxes and owls hidden in the trees. Grant leaned against the wall with a beer in his hand and said, "This gray is much more mature, don't you think?" I turned to Dad, waiting for him to stop it. To say something. Anything. He didn't. Instead, he said, it was time for a change. But that night, I went for a walk and didn't come home until dawn. Then, the twist I hadn't seen coming, not from them, but from somewhere else entirely. My mom's sister, Aunt Carla, showed up on my doorstep one Saturday morning with a thick yellow envelope and a look that said she'd been holding on to something for too long. "She wanted you to have this when you were old enough," she said, pressing the envelope into my hand. Inside were letters. 3 of them, all in my mom's handwriting. The first was addressed to me. It started with "My dearest," and I had to stop after the first sentence because my throat was closing. She talked about her dreams for me, how she hoped I'd grow into someone kind and strong, how proud she was already, how no matter what happened, she wanted me to remember that the house was more than wood and nails. It was a symbol of love, of family, of where we came from. The second letter was addressed to my dad. It was harder to read. She asked him to hold on to the house until I was ready. She wrote about how it had been passed down through her family, and how she hoped it would stay in our bloodline. "Let it be as someday," she wrote, "even if I'm not there to see it." The third letter was a will, handwritten, dated, and signed. She left everything she owned to me, what little there was, but specifically mentioned the house. "To my son, for when he is grown and needs a place to remember me by." My chest felt hollow. I showed Dad the letters that evening. His face went pale. For the first time in years, he didn't have a quick answer or a dismissive excuse. "I didn't know," he said quietly, reading the letter addressed to him. "She trusted you," I said. "She trusted you to make sure I got this house someday." He sat down hard, like his knees buckled under the weight of it all. Lily came in halfway through our conversation and asked what was wrong. I didn't answer. I didn't look at her. I handed Dad the third letter and walked out. Later that night, he came into my room and asked if we could talk. I expected some sort of reconciliation, a change of heart. Instead, he told me that the letter might not be legally valid, since it wasn't notarized, that we'd have to look into it properly. That's when I knew he wasn't going to give the house back. Not because it wasn't mine, not because the letter was invalid, but because he'd already promised it to someone else. Lily. And worse, he'd already put her name on the deed. He had done it a year ago, while I was still living there. While I was still setting plates at dinner, walking past the empty spot where Mom's chair used to be, trying to pretend the laughter in the kitchen didn't make me feel like a ghost in my own life. He signed the house over. I don't remember what I said to him after that. Only that my voice was shaking and my fists were clenched so tight I left crescent moons in my palms. I left that night and didn't go back. Not until everything had fallen apart. I didn't speak to my dad for 8 months after that night. Not because I wanted to punish him. I just didn't know how to exist in a world where he was no longer the man I thought he was. I stayed with a friend for the first few weeks, sleeping on a lumpy couch and folding my clothes into piles on the floor. Eventually, I scraped together enough to get a tiny one-bedroom apartment above a nail salon. It reeked of acetone and had paper-thin walls, but it was mine. The silence was my own, and no one could paint over my memories. I poured myself into school and work, slowly building a version of life that felt solid under my feet. Every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering if maybe I'd made it all worse by walking out. Maybe I could have reasoned with Dad. Maybe if I'd given it more time, he'd have come around. But then I'd see Lily's smile in my mind, the way she pretended to care, the way her children lounged in a house they had no history with, and the guilt would burn out like paper in a fire. Then came the news. I was mid-shift at the bookstore when Mia messaged me. Dad collapsed at work. They're saying it was his heart. It felt like my lungs forgot how to work. I left without saying anything to my manager and drove straight to the hospital. But I was too late. He was gone. No goodbyes. No last words. Just gone. I sat in the hospital parking lot for 2 hours before I even went inside. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be there, if I'd still count as family. When I finally gathered the courage to enter, a nurse led me to a waiting room where Lily sat between her children, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She looked up at me surprised. Not relieved. Not grateful. Just surprised. Did they call you? She asked, her voice raw. No, I replied. Mia did. Grant didn't look at me. He scrolled on his phone like we were waiting for a table at a restaurant. I sat in the far corner and stared at the tiled floor, waiting for someone to tell me what I was supposed to do now. After about 20 minutes, Lily stood and announced she was going home to rest. To the house, she said, not looking in my direction. We're all just exhausted. She left without asking if I wanted to say goodbye, without offering me a place to grieve. The funeral was arranged within the week. Lily handled most of it, of course. The service was small, tasteful, impersonal. There was no mention of Mom, not even in the slideshow, which only included pictures from the past 10 years. I sat 2 rows back, flanked by my mother's sister and her husband. When I stood to speak, I didn't talk about Dad's new life, his second family, or his cheerful weekends spent grilling on the deck Lily redecorated. I spoke about the man who helped me ride a bike, who made pancakes every Sunday, who once painted a mural of constellations on my ceiling when I told him I wanted to be an astronaut. I did not speak about the man who erased my mother. After the burial, Lily approached me, her face strained with an expression that tried to resemble peace. I hope we can let the past go now, she said. He wouldn't want us fighting. I looked at her for a long moment before replying. He's not here to want anything anymore. And neither is she. Then I walked away. 3 weeks passed before I got the call from my aunt. She's listing the house, she told me. I saw the sign go up this morning. I didn't respond right away. She didn't even wait a month, she added softly. I drove by that evening. The for sale sign gleamed under the streetlight, bold and sharp and final. My childhood home, Mom's garden, the creaky porch, the rose-colored bricks had a price now. A listing. A slideshow online. A walkthrough video that showcased the charming renovations and modern updates Lily had made. They didn't show the growth chart under the stairs. They didn't show the patch in the wall where my mom had let me punch it after I got cut from the soccer team in 6th grade. They didn't show the past. I didn't fight it. I had no legal claim. Dad had made sure of that years ago when he added Lily to the deed. The court wouldn't side with a grieving son over paperwork that had been signed, sealed, and filed away in some bland beige cabinet in City Hall. I let it go, not because I was at peace, but because there was nothing left to protect. But karma, as my grandmother used to say, is patient. It doesn't always come dressed in rage. Sometimes it waits. It waited for Lily. She overpriced the house, expecting a bidding war that never came. She kept declining offers, sure someone would meet her sky-high expectations. But the market dipped, the house lingered, and buyers moved on. She dropped the price, then dropped it again. By the time it sold, she walked away with barely half of what she thought she'd get. Grant and Mia got their cut. Grant dumped his into a crypto project that vanished overnight. He blamed market manipulation and moved into a friend's basement shortly after. Mia used hers for a car she couldn't afford, wrecked it within 3 weeks, and ended up being sued by the other driver, who, as fate would have it, was the son of a local judge. And Lily? She disappeared. Word had it she ran off to Florida with a man she met in a Facebook group for widows. She posted inspirational quotes and selfies on beaches for a while. Then the IRS caught up with her, something about undisclosed assets, an accounting oversight, and a very expensive mistake. She came crawling back home within the year, broke, jobless, and abandoned by her own children. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't feel bad either. One day, I drove by where the house used to be, only it wasn't anymore. The new owners tore it down, built a sleek, angular structure that looked like it belonged in a magazine. It didn't feel like my home had been desecrated. It felt like it had been buried properly, like the ghost of what used to be had finally been given rest. I sat across the street for a long time, listening to music Mom used to play while cleaning. Then I drove away. That was the day I finally started planning for a new home of my own. One that would never forget. One that would never be rewritten by someone else's ambition. And this time, there would be a will. A real one. It wasn't until a few months later, after the house was gone, after the legal dust had settled, that I began to understand what had happened in its entirety. I went back to visit my mom's family. Grandma and Grandpa were still living in the same house, the one I'd spent countless weekends in growing up. The smell of cinnamon and fresh-baked bread still clung to the kitchen. Nothing had really changed there, except the slow erosion of time that you can't escape. Grandma sat me down one afternoon and, with an odd calm, said something that stuck with me. Your mother always said that material things don't last, but karma doesn't forget. I hadn't fully understood it at the time. I mean, sure, I knew the whole idea that what goes around comes around. But it wasn't until the news came in about Lily, about her fall from grace, the mess she'd made of everything she touched, that the weight of what she had taken from us, from me, started to sink in. My life had been a fight for something that was never really mine, not legally. But what my mom had left behind, her spirit, her presence, her memory, was far more powerful than anything Lily could ever lay claim to. I found out about Lily's financial mess from my aunt, who had been doing some quiet digging. Apparently, not long after moving to Florida, Lily had decided to reinvest the proceeds from the house sale into a series of ill-advised investments. The first, a failed real estate venture, turned into a massive loss. The second, a groundbreaking health supplement business that never made it past a few late-night infomercials, drained the last of her funds. But the real punch came when my aunt found out from a colleague at the county records office that Lily had been under investigation for tax fraud. It turns out she had filed false returns, evading thousands of dollars in tax obligations. It was a mess, a scandal that spread through the town faster than a wildfire. Karma had finally shown up. The funniest part? Lily had taken everything she wanted so quickly, but what she didn't anticipate was the fall. She didn't know that you can only get away with pretending to be something you're not for so long before the world starts asking questions. Her kids, who had once lauded her as a perfect stepmom, distanced themselves the moment the money dried up. Mia's career, such as it was, collapsed into a heap of bad decisions. Grant? Well, his weed business ended with 2 arrests and a criminal record, something I wasn't surprised to hear about. I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction, not because I enjoyed seeing them fail, but because it felt like the universe had its own way of righting wrongs. I'd spent so many years stewing in resentment, focusing on how unfair it was. But here, in this quiet way, it all came full circle. I spent a lot of nights after that thinking about my mom, about how much she fought for me, for us, even when we weren't aware of it. The house, her legacy, had been the final chapter in her life's work. And Lily's ambition had tried to rip that chapter out. But it wasn't gone, not really. It was buried under layers of lies and greed, but it was still there. Eventually, I started to heal. Slowly, piece by piece. It wasn't easy. The anger, the betrayal, they didn't just vanish. But over time, I met someone. Her name was Leah. She worked at the same coffee shop I frequented when I needed to get out of my head. I'd noticed her before. Her laugh was like sunlight, and she had a kind of warmth that made you want to stay close. But it wasn't until a random conversation about books that we really connected. Leah was the first person I opened up to about everything: the house, my dad, the mess. She didn't judge me. Instead, she listened. She understood what it meant to lose family, to have that whole image of what your life was supposed to be crumble away. It felt good to talk about it, without the weight of judgment or pity. A few months later, Leah and I moved in together. It wasn't a grand affair, just a small apartment above a flower shop, but it was ours. The feeling of walking through the door and knowing it was ours was something I'd never thought I'd experience. It was like, for the first time in a long while, I could breathe without the weight of all that loss pressing down on me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to go back to that house. Not because I was over it, but because I had finally found something that was truly mine. We started making new memories, carving out our own place in the world. I began painting again, something I'd stopped doing years ago when everything felt pointless. I made a new growth chart for our future kids, just in case. A few months after we moved in, I got a call from my aunt. She had some news about the house. "It's over," she said, as if I needed a moment to process. "The new owners tore it down," she continued. "They built something else, something modern. Doesn't even look like it used to." I didn't know how to feel. I hadn't driven by the lot since they'd sold it. The house was gone. My childhood home, the last piece of my mother's legacy, was gone. But as I sat there, with Leah making coffee in the kitchen, I realized something. The house didn't make the memories. My mom had made them. She had filled every corner of that house with love, with laughter, with the kind of quiet moments that stick with you forever. No amount of paint or new walls could take that from me. And maybe that's why, after everything, I was finally able to let go. Not because I had to, but because I realized that home wasn't just a place. It was the people you loved, the moments you held on to, the way you made the world your own. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Karma didn't have to come for Lily and her kids. Life already did. I still miss my mom, though. I don't think I'll ever stop missing her. But I know she's proud of the man I've become, the man I always was underneath all the pain and anger. And that's enough. The world has a funny way of spinning on, even when we feel like it should stop for just a moment. A year passed, and while I was settling into a routine, finding my rhythm again with Leah and trying to piece together the fragments of my past, life had other plans. It was a Friday afternoon when I got the call that shook me awake from this comfortable cocoon I'd built around myself. I'd been driving to meet Leah for dinner when my phone buzzed. It was my aunt again. "Are you sitting down?" she asked, her voice tight. I could tell something had happened, but I had no idea what. "I'm at a red light," I said. "What's going on?" "I got some information from one of the old family friends," she started. "It's about your dad's estate. They found something unusual." The world tilted. I pulled over into a parking lot, heart pounding in my chest. The past had been put to rest, at least, that's what I told myself. I thought the legal battles were over, that my relationship with my dad was done. I had moved on, or so I believed. "They're trying to sell the other assets," she continued. "But there's a catch. Your dad's retirement funds, his savings, none of it was actually his." I could feel my throat tightening as I tried to understand what she was telling me. "What do you mean? What's left?" "It's all tied to Lily now," she said, her voice lowering. "The house, the money, everything. He put it all in her name before he passed. Your dad didn't leave anything to you. The house may have been a battle won in the courts, but the rest of it, Lily's taken it all." It was like a punch to the gut. I thought I had been prepared for this. But hearing it, the realization that my father's estate was essentially gone, given away to someone who had no connection to him, to me, hurt in ways I couldn't put into words. I didn't ask for more details. I didn't need to. I already knew where this was going. Lily was claiming what she felt was hers, and Dad's name was still attached to it, no matter how much he'd promised to protect me. But I had no choice but to face it. I spent that evening with Leah, telling her everything I could about the call. I was still in shock, running over the details in my head. How had Dad managed to tie everything to Lily, even after everything that had happened? Did he truly believe that this was protecting her? Or was it just his way of giving her control over his legacy? My mind raced, thinking of all the ways I could challenge it. But in the end, I knew I wasn't equipped for another battle. Leah held my hand, not asking any questions. She knew what I needed, peace. After everything with my father, everything I'd gone through, I wasn't sure how much more I could take. But just as I was beginning to think that maybe this chapter of my life would never fully close, something else came in. A lawyer's letter. It arrived the following week, and the timing couldn't have been worse. My aunt had tried to warn me, but even she didn't understand what was happening. The letter was addressed to me. The law firm informed me that there had been an additional amendment to my father's will, one that hadn't been discovered during the initial legal proceedings. A clause had been buried in a stack of papers. It stated that, upon his death, all remaining assets would be transferred not to Lily, but to me. The letter was dated the same week Dad had passed. It was a secret kept under wraps until now. I read it over and over, not understanding how this was possible. My first reaction was disbelief. My second was confusion. Why hadn't this come out earlier? Why hadn't anyone mentioned it? And then it hit me. Dad had known what was coming. He had known that he'd made a decision that would cut me out of his life. So, in his final act of redemption, he had made sure that something, at least, would come to me, something that couldn't be stolen, that would forever tie me to him in some small way. I didn't know what to feel at first. Relief? Anger? Both? Leah was the first person I spoke to after reading the letter. I didn't want to tell her, not because I didn't trust her, but because I couldn't explain why this was happening. I didn't want to drag her into this new mess. But she insisted I tell her, and so I did. She listened, holding my hand in the way she always did when life got too big. Then, she looked me in the eye and said something that shifted the way I thought about everything. "You don't have to decide anything right now," she said. "Take the time you need. Do you want to fight for this? Or do you just want to walk away and build your future with what you have now?" I had never considered that. I had spent so much of my life fighting, trying to take back what I thought was owed to me. But here was someone offering me a different perspective. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about getting back at Lily or proving something to my father. It was about me, about the life I had already started to build, about the house I was planning with Leah, the future we were going to have. The past was gone, and I wasn't sure I wanted to keep looking back. That's when I decided. I wasn't going to keep fighting over a legacy that didn't belong to me anymore. I wouldn't accept the inheritance, not because I didn't need it, but because I didn't want it. I had Leah, I had my own plans, and I would never let my father's mistakes define my future. The lawyer got my response a few days later. I chose to walk away from everything. It wasn't easy, but as I sat with Leah, making plans for the life we wanted together, I realized that the things we'd fought over, property, money, family, were just stuff. They were fleeting. What I had now, what I had in this moment, was real. And it was enough. In the end, it wasn't about winning anything. It was about learning how to live with what you had, with who you are, and finding peace in that. Even without the house, even without my dad, I had finally found my own way forward. And that was the only inheritance I needed. It's funny, the way life moves forward, even when you feel stuck in place. A year went by since I made my decision to walk away from everything tied to my father. Since then, things have changed in ways I never expected. The legal battle over the house had long since faded into the past. Lily's world crumbled with the house sale, and I heard rumors about how she disappeared back to Florida to lick her wounds. The last I heard, she was working as a waitress in some small-town diner, trying to put together the shattered pieces of her life. I didn't feel satisfaction in her downfall. No, if anything, I just felt nothing. I had learned something through all of this, the power of detachment. It wasn't that I didn't care anymore, but I learned that I didn't need the past to define me. I didn't need to hold on to anger or resentment to justify my feelings. It wasn't worth it. Leah and I were building something solid, a foundation that wasn't based on the ruins of my past, but on the possibilities of our future. We moved into a little cottage on the outskirts of town, a place I never would have thought was possible when I was younger. It was quaint, old, and needed a lot of work, but it felt like ours. Not like the house I'd grown up in. That house had been stolen, erased. But this was something new. Something that belonged to us. We didn't rush things. We decorated slowly, picking things out together, each item a reflection of who we were now. There were no memories of my mother's old garden in the backyard. No old family heirlooms. But there were our memories, starting with every simple thing. Working on the house together, finding old records at thrift stores, making dinner together in the kitchen. It was everything I had wanted from my childhood, minus all the pain. I focused on my work, real estate, not for the wealth, but for the ability to help people find homes that weren't built on ghosts of the past. It felt right. It felt good to help someone else build a foundation, something they could call their own. One night, about a month into our new life, I found myself sitting on the back porch, sipping a beer, watching the sunset. Leah came outside, sitting beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. "You know, I was thinking," she said, looking up at the sky. "We never really talked about what you wanted to do with the inheritance." I stiffened. The thought had barely crossed my mind, but now that she mentioned it, I realized I hadn't truly let it go completely. The letter, the will, the fact that there was money out there that should have been mine. But I didn't want it. I never wanted it. Yeah, I said slowly, feeling the weight of it all in my chest. I've thought about it a lot. Honestly, I don't think I want any of it. Leah shifted so she could look me in the eye. Are you sure? It's yours. You worked hard for it, too. No, I said firmly. I don't need it. That's the thing, Leah. It's not about the money. It's not about the house. It's about moving forward. The past is gone. I've learned that the hard way. Leah nodded, understanding more than I could put into words. So what's next? I smiled. What's next is us. What we build here, together. And that was enough. We didn't need anything else. We didn't need my dad's legacy or Lily's destruction. We didn't need the house that was lost or the memories that had been taken. We only needed what we had right in front of us. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when I'd catch myself standing in the middle of the living room, staring at the bare walls and thinking about how different things could have been if Dad had made a different choice, or if Lily hadn't been so selfish. But those thoughts were fleeting, like clouds passing through the sky. They didn't stay. And as for my mom, I still missed her every single day. Her absence was like a hole in the middle of my heart that would never fully close. But I knew she would have been proud of the man I'd become, not because I'd won anything, but because I'd learned what mattered. I'd learned how to move forward. Life wasn't fair. It never had been. But I didn't need fairness. I just needed to keep moving, one step at a time, building something that could never be taken from me. And as I sat there on the porch with Leah, her hand in mine, I realized that was enough. The house that I had lost, the legacy my father had given away, and the life I had struggled to reclaim, all of it was a part of me. But it was no longer who I was. I was more than that. And I was ready for whatever came next. The final chapter in that book was over. But the one I was writing now, that one had only just begun. Time has a way of smoothing out the sharp edges, of making the things that once seemed like insurmountable mountains look like just another bump in the road. A year passed since Leah and I had settled into our life together. Our little cottage, which had once felt like a temporary haven, had now transformed into a true home. It was no longer a place where I was just hiding from the past. It was a place where I had the freedom to be who I was meant to be. Leah and I worked together in our own rhythm. We spent weekends fixing up the house, painting walls, sanding floors, building our dreams from the ground up. Sometimes, I would catch myself in the middle of one of our projects, laughing with her over something silly, and I would feel this quiet satisfaction in the fact that I had finally found peace. There were no more angry phone calls from my dad's side of the family. No more reminders of everything that had been stolen from me. The inheritance, both financial and emotional, had slipped through my fingers, but in a way, I had gained more than I ever could have imagined. I had gained a life that was mine to shape, without the constraints of other people's choices. But the truth is, no matter how much you move forward, there are always little moments when the past catches up with you. It was early in the spring, just as the trees were beginning to bud, when I got a call from my aunt again. I had stopped expecting anything to come from them, not after everything that had happened. But this time, it was different. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight, like she was bracing for something. "What about?" I asked, dreading whatever news might be coming my way. "Lily," she said, and my heart sank. "She's in trouble." I sat in silence, feeling the weight of those two words. After everything, after all the damage, why was Lily's name still a part of my life? Why did I have to hear about her again? "She's facing charges. Tax fraud, embezzlement. It's bad. I know you've moved on, but I thought you should know," my aunt continued. "She's reached out. Wants to speak to you. She's desperate." I almost laughed. The nerve. After everything, after erasing my mom's memory, after trying to steal my future, she wanted something from me. She wanted forgiveness. She wanted my help. I didn't know what to say at first. It took me a moment to collect myself. "No," I said flatly. "I'm not interested. You don't have to help her. I just wanted you to know," my aunt said, her voice softer now. "You've been through a lot, and I know you don't want to get caught up in any of this again. But I thought you deserved to know." I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time, staring out the window at the garden Leah and I had planted together. The flowers were in bloom, bright and vibrant. It was hard not to smile when I looked at them, the little patches of color scattered across the yard, reminding me that life had a way of coming back, even after the hardest of winters. Lily's call, the idea that she would seek me out now, felt almost surreal. She had always been a symbol of everything that had gone wrong in my life. But now? Now, she was just a shadow of the person she once was. A person who had nothing left to take from me, nothing left to destroy. It was almost laughable. I didn't feel anger anymore. There was no more rage bubbling inside me. Just a sense of distance, a sense of having left that part of my life far behind me. I went to bed that night next to Leah, feeling the warmth of her beside me. We didn't talk about it. There was nothing to discuss. The past was gone, but it wasn't as heavy anymore. I had let go of what had been taken from me. I had learned that the only way to move forward was to stop looking back. The next morning, as I sipped coffee on the porch, I realized that this was it. I had reached a place where I no longer needed to carry the weight of my past, where the things that had once defined me, the loss, the betrayal, no longer had power over me. I had created something new, a life that belonged to me, not to the ghosts of the past. Life was still messy, still unpredictable. There would always be moments of doubt, moments when the past tried to rear its ugly head. But in those moments, I had learned to breathe, to remember that I had already faced the worst of it. And I was still here. In the end, it wasn't the house, the inheritance, or even the people who tried to take it all away that mattered. It was the lessons I had learned along the way, the strength I had gained through the battles, and the peace that came from finally letting go. I looked up at the sky and smiled, the wind carrying the scent of spring through the air. Whatever was next, I was ready, and that was enough. The final chapter of the past had closed, but the next chapter of my life? That one had just begun.